In this video, we're going to look at the UAE Ecosystems for LSN1113, Introduction to Sustainability. So we're going to look at the four main ecosystems. Now the first one is the land, and most of the land here is desert. Then we will look at the wetlands, and particularly the mangroves that grow and their role. Then at the marine aspect, specifically the coral reefs, and then we will stay with the marine and look at the seagrass meadows. So let's move on to the first one, the land, the desert in the UAE. Now there are certain challenges with desert life, and the primary one is shortage of water. There are not many lakes, very few rivers, most of the water is under the ground, and as it says here, there is a shortage. And when we looked at the other videos on the ecosystems and the climate and the increased population, there is not enough water to meet the needs. Also, with a desert environment, there is extreme heat, which causes a lot of evaporation. Because of the desert structure, there are not many places to grow vast amounts of food. And with the increasing population, this can become an issue. Finally, the soil. The desert doesn't contain a lot of nutrients in which to feed plants. However, there are some plants that grow naturally within the UAE, and as you drive around, you will see these three. In the desert, there is the wildlife, and you will be familiar with these animals as you live here. Next, let's look at the mangroves as part of the wetlands. The habitat of the mangroves is very distinct. It's intertidal. So we talked about the tides come in and go out. So this is the area between the land and the sea. Now, these areas are very good for mangroves because mangroves like brackish water. Now, brackish water is water, it's not seawater, which is very salty, but it is not fresh water either. It is in between the two, so it is slightly salty. Now, in the mangroves, you do see certain kinds of wildlife, which we are familiar with, the heron, the flamingo, and the egret. Now, the mangrove is a particular kind of ecosystem, and it's home to many birds, mammals, and invertebrates. Now, the reason the mangroves are important is that they protect and stabilize the coastal areas. The roots go down a long way, and they make the land very safe and give it structure. And when the waves come in and go out, remember the tides come in and the tides go out, it keeps this land together. So the waves or the tides do not take all of that back out to sea. It also is a good protection against winds and floods. If you look around the roots of the mangrove, you will see that it's like a nursery. It provides protection for many, many fish, including shrimp, turtles, and crabs. Now, a major part of the mangroves is it acts as a carbon sink. It stores more carbon than many other land ecosystems. This is very, very important for that carbon transfer, oxygen, CO2, CO2 to oxygen, that sort of thing. The mangroves also provide ecotourism. They're very popular with people who come to visit and want to canoe through those areas. However, there are some threats to the mangroves. And like many other things, we are one of the main threats. So let's go through that. First one is coastal development. Look at the amount of building that has gone on in the UAE. We're building right against the coast and inland. Now, opposite that is often some of the mangroves. Now, in some places and in some countries, they have taken away the mangroves and dried out the land in order to build. The second one is the dumping of waste, the human impact. Not a good way as it kills the mangroves. Also, there's the overlogging. The mangroves are very good for fuel. Now there is the overgrazing of camels. Camels love it because it is a very rich source of food for them. Next one, and the final one, is pollution. Again, a human impact issue, as this kills the mangroves. And remember, the mangroves are very good for adding structure to that coastline, so the waves don't take away that sand, and the CO2 to oxygen transfer. The third area, the marine, we're going to look at the coral reefs and why they are important. Well, they provide biodiversity. Biological diversity, many different types. And there are over 4,000 different types of fish species. And we believe there are possibly more than 1 million undiscovered organisms that live in these coral reefs. When we look at these reefs and the way they are structured, they are a possible source for many new drugs and medicines. However, there are the commercial fishing species. We do not want to overfish these species because they are important to the structure of the coral reefs. And then there is unsustainable tourism, because these are very beautiful and very popular. So when people go, they can actually destroy these. Now, those last three, commercial fish species, tourism and recreation, okay, very, very important. And they can actually bring in money to help support them. But too much tourism and inappropriate tourism can damage them. The coral reefs also protect the coast from storms and waves. So just like the mangroves protect that land area or where the sand is and soil, the coral reefs in the water protect the coast. So what are some of the other threats? Ocean acidification, normally the pollution that we cause, and this causes the coral to bleach. So it loses some of its colour, it dies and goes this white colour. Coastal development, which we talked about previously, the building along the edge of these areas, we dredge the land. And when we say we dredge the land, we remove the water, we add more land and we build on it, destroying the natural coral environment. Destructive fishing methods, where we overfish. And finally, unsustainable tourism. Tourism is good, it brings in money. But in these areas, people often throw out an anchor, and that can actually hook into the coral reefs, and especially when we take away the anchor, rip away the coral reef structure. The last one we're going to look at, also part of the marine, is the seagrass meadows. Now, the seagrass meadows are some of the most extensive and largest in the world. Now, these are very productive habitats, and they are home to a huge population of species. And as we damage these seagrass meadows, we threaten these species, which are very important for the balance and biodiversity in sea life. One of the roles of these seagrasses is they absorb a lot of the blue carbon, and they store it in the plants below the ground. This is very, very important. Just an interesting picture to finish with. In the seagrass, there is the dugong, this interesting looking mammal that looks like a cross between a seal and many other species. There's an interesting video down here if you wish to watch and find out more about that.